sometimes nothing's going to change until someone goes through the heartache and pain of a broken heart. In fact, if you look at the history of our world over and over again, nothing changes in our world until somebody is broken by the fact that something just isn't the way that it ought to be. Clara Barton was a nurse in Washington, D.C. when the Civil War broke out. And it broke her heart that wounded soldiers lacked access to proper medical care. In her generation, it was normal that soldiers did not have access to proper medical care, but when she saw this problem, it wrecked her. And she not only earned the nickname of the Angel of the Battlefield, but Clara went on to found the American Red Cross Association, which helps people struggling and suffering all over our world to this day. William Wilberforce was a member of the British Parliament in the early 19th century, a time when a major pillar of the British economy was built on transatlantic slave trade. Wilbur became a Christian. And it broke his heart that people being made in God's image were being treated this savagely. It was normal in the British Empire. This had been going on for 50 years when it broke his heart, and he realized no one was going to do anything about this. And Wilberforce became the tip of the spear for abolition of slavery in the British Empire in 1833. Bob Pierce was a missionary in China after World War II in the late 1940s. And on the street one day, he saw a little girl abandoned to die because her family could not give her the food and medicine she needed to survive. And in the late 1940s, in China, many children suffered this fate, but when Bob saw it, it broke him. He went home and he wrote this in his Bible. Let my heart be broken by the things that break the heart of God. Let my heart be broken by the things that break the heart of God. And Bob Pierce went on to found World Vision, one of the largest humanitarian aid organizations in our world today. Because what we see in the life of Nehemiah, what we see over and over in the history of the world is that the movements that change the world begin with a broken heart. It's when someone looks at something that just isn't the way it should be and they can't live with that any longer. And it's not just true of the movements that change the world. The movements that change families begin with a broken heart. One of the things we talk about in our pre-marriage classes at Hope Church is that your family has generational sin. Your mom did it, she learned it from your grandma, and she learned it from your great-grandma. Your dad does it, he learned it from your grandfather, he learned it from your great-grandfather. There is generational sin, generational brokenness that is passed down from generation to generation. And it's not until one generation rises up and say, no more, not in this family. We are not going to live this way any longer. We are unplugging from all of that because that's not the way family could be or should be. The movements that change families begin with a broken heart. The movements that change communities begin with a broken heart. 12 years ago, there was a high school senior at Hope Church. She looked at a nonprofit ministry in the city of Milwaukee that did not have the resources it needed to get their work done. Now, that's a problem that's everywhere in the city of Milwaukee. There are hundreds of nonprofits that don't have the resources they need. There are hundreds of ministries that don't have the resources they need. That's normal, but when she looked at the situation, she wasn't okay with it anymore. And the Give Hope offering was born at Hope Church. Since that time, you have given away almost $1.5 million directly to people in need, and it all began when one 18-year-old girl had a broken heart. The movements that change the world begin with a broken heart. That's why there's a Hope Church to begin with. 23 years ago, a group of people said, the church is for everybody, but when they looked around, a lot of the churches were just for church people, not for everybody. And that was normal, but it broke their hearts. They couldn't live in a world like that any longer, so they did something about it, and Hope Church was born. The movements that change the world begin with a broken heart. And Nehemiah looks at the fact that nobody's going to do anything about this, and it broke his heart. And for 4 months, he prayed and he wept and he fasted. Until one day, King Artaxerxes notices his usually cheerful cupbearer has been really down lately. So he asks him, what's wrong? He says, how can I be joyful when the city of my fathers lies in ruins? And here's what happened. The king said to me, what is it you want? Then I prayed to the God of heaven, and I answered the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city of Judah where my ancestors are buried, so that I can rebuild it. Now, there's a little bit of history you need to understand to appreciate what Nehemiah is asking for here. This very same King Artaxerxes I had already issued a decree that the city walls of Jerusalem should never be rebuilt. See, it had come to his attention that Jerusalem was once a great city with powerful kings that ruled that region. And this was a city with a penchant for rebellion. They were fiercely independent people. And he wanted nothing to do with rebellion in his empire, so he said, it is against the law for the city of Jerusalem to ever rebuild its laws. Nehemiah comes along and says, King, I think you were wrong. I would like you to send me for this job. Now, I wanted to put this in a modern context. Here's what I came up with. This might be terrible, but imagine this. Imagine the White House chef is mopey. And one day, he's serving the President of the United States lunch, and the President says, what has you down? And the White House chef says, I think your policy in the Middle East is all jacked up, and the way you're handling Israel is totally wrong. I would like you to appoint me to be the Secretary of State so I can go clean up your mess. The White House chef. Nehemiah goes to the king, and that's his very request. And the king, who highly esteems and respects Nehemiah, says, okay, I'll give you the time off work. I'll send you. I'll make you the governor of that area. And I will pay the material expenses of rebuilding the city wall of Jerusalem where your ancestors are buried. See, sometimes God answers your prayers miraculously. Other times, God opens a door so you can step through it as his answer to your prayers. And in Nehemiah's case, God opened the door so Nehemiah could step through it and become God's answer to his own prayer. So Nehemiah travels to the city of Jerusalem, and this is going to be a massive undertaking to rebuild the city walls. So he has to gather everyone who lives there together to collectively pursue this great cause. So we're going to skip several verses here. You can go read the story of Nehemiah at home and fill in all the gaps that I'm skipping today. I'm just giving you the overview. Then I said to them, the citizens of Jerusalem, you see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me and what the king had said to me. He says, guys, for 141 years, this stoplight has been red. God just turned it green. The king is supporting it. He's financing the material cost. We have to pitch in the labor on our own, but we can all do this together right now. And this leads us to our second principle. The second principle is this. The movements that change the world ignite when people pitch in to help. They begin when someone has a broken heart, but they catch fire when people pitch in to help. Do you know why the walls had been in ruins for 141 years? Because this project, the one they were undertaking, was to build a wall that is 12 feet high, 8 feet wide, and 2.5 miles long, with no cranes, backhoes, or cement trucks. That's why it had been in ruins for 141 years. Nehemiah says, now's the time to make a difference. And the entire city rallies around the cause. The world changes when people pitch in to help. Maybe you don't have a broken heart about something in our world. Apparently, the fact that the walls of Jerusalem were in rubble didn't break anybody's heart in the city of Jerusalem. But when Nehemiah brings their attention to it, they say, that's right. We can help.